me, will you still, what is it? Will you still hold me will you still love me until I'm 64? To episode 64. And it is Thursday, the 21st of January. Welcome along. Welcome along. And it is a great day to be knitting today. It is I guess, with the weather the way it's been, not really the classic Kiwi summer that we're used to having down here. But in my book, every day is a great day to be knitting, and especially here at Skeinz because it's Thursday, so therefore it's a stitch and summer day. And today is one we knew you would love. It is Orb DK. So for those who had wondered why on earth they got 2 newsletters in your email this morning, I woke up very early this morning. Would you believe to watch the American inauguration on TV? I know, tragic, but there you go. That's me. So I was up and I was checking to make sure everything was loaded properly. And yes, to my horror, I realized that because I'd preloaded that actually before I went away on holiday, hadn't changed the title. So whilst the email was correct, the title in your title bar was for the one that was for morning, cuz, do you want Ethan this morning? Yeah, go on, why not? I saw that comment the other day, so hold on, I'm just going to do this for Deb. I'm putting it in the comments here, Deb, so you can, for Ethan. Yeah, that'd be great, because I've got some stuff I want to talk to him about this morning too. Oh, awesome. Oh, yay, exciting. Right, so I lost my train of thought. Yes, anyway, I was up early and I suddenly thought, oh, good night, I need to change that. So I have gone and I went in, changed it, sent it out, and then just with the correct header on it. So you all knew that it was actually Orb and it was something amazing, instead of looking at it going, oh, baby bandit, we did it the other day. Here he is. Hold on, I'll let him get set up. I better turn some noise on so I can hear him for starters too. That's always a good start. I'm ready. Oh, there he is. Right, you ready? Let's do this, please. Hold on, come on. You want to. Oh, here we go. Here you come. Boom! Look at that.
By the magic of Grayskull.
Hello, how are you?
Morning. Happy New Year. Good. How are you?
I know, it feels like forever.
Oh, right?
I know.
Down here in the Christchurch, it's been the windiest 5 days of the whole year.
Well, I was just saying before we got you, I was just saying that, yeah, it has been the weirdest summer. It is
totally inexplicable.
Yeah, totally crazy. We've had, super wind here too. I know I was talking to someone the other day down south, they had snow, and there's been hail and crazy. Absolutely crazy. So it's quite good because, organised and all. I was just telling everyone we've got Orb DK out on promotion today. Yeah, which is our fantastic DK. So that's $5.95 a ball. Superwash merino, boom, 113 meters per ball. So that's great value in anybody's money. And so I've got some projects here, but I'm really glad you're here because there were a couple of different, there's a whole bunch of stuff we can talk about today. Absolutely. I know you have got a heap of things on the needles that I'm dying to see.
It's a serious problem.
Yeah, I know. Usually you cast on a lot, but I think even for you, you've been quite excessive.
I've been kind of burning the house down on getting them off the needles. So I got this guy finished just before Christmas.
So this is the chain link tunic.
Yes, by Noragon. The one and only.
I said to Deb when I spoke to her last week, I'm like, did that boy ever sleep or eat? Because I know the amount of work that's in that. Now, to be fair, I do know you've knitted it before, so it is a path that you've taken, but that is a massive amount of work in that tunic. How on earth did you get it off the needles that quick?
So I'm not going to lie, with stuff like this, the reason I can get through it so quickly is because it is knit at 3 different gauges. So you're knitting the sleeves on a 3.75 millimeter, the body on a 4.5. I'm going to stand up and see if I can keep it in camera briefly.
Incredible. Look at that.
And it has
amazing geometric piece.
Angled geometric fronts to it and a little slash on my side skin there. You're welcome, everyone. Mark your calendars. The love handles are out to play. And this portion is knit down on a 2.75 millimeter. But to be honest, the speed of the knit comes from Nora's instructions. She's one of those designers where even though it's a lot of knitting, if you actually just do exactly what she says, you will get through it. Yeah. And I'm not going to lie, I can do this cable pattern without looking. So feel free to send your hate mail to hq@outlawyarn.com. So I actually just put on like an entire series of documentaries from Werner Herzog, everyone's favorite Austrian. And there's a sentence you don't say very often.
No.
And I literally just watched documentaries and power knit like nobody's business because I needed it done it had to be done by this Saturday because this is one of the colors coming out this Saturday. So.
Right, which is the perfect segue when you say this is a color. Now, before anyone of my lot get excited, we're going to be talking about a lot of stuff that actually you can only get from Outlaw HQ.
Yes.
So, because it is only available in very limited quantities, but we do want to talk about it because it is really amazing. And it also, I mean, I know you and I have spoken about this before, but I think it is worth talking about again, is around the properties of different yarns and how different yarns react and work.
Absolutely.
And there is a yarn for every job. You know, there is so I mean, the orb that we've got on sale today.
Oh, great.
You know, if you're wanting to do a baby DK knit, this is your number one stop. I mean, it is perfect for baby DK knits. And before you say to me, oh, Marie, that's not a very baby colour.
Every colour is a baby colour.
Every colour is a baby colour.
Seriously.
Thank you. And I pulled all of these out. I deliberately pulled all of these out.
Oh, and those would look so fantastic mixed with your new pulse as well. Like if you were to use the pulse as the color work with that as a background, like, shut up. Oh, love it. Is that striped sweater?
Yeah.
Good.
So I showed everybody this on Monday. Now, to be fair, this is actually knitted in Quince & Co., but the colours, as you can see,
are so similar.
Yeah, exactly. Sorry, not the microphone. And that is the sort of thing that if you're wanting to actually do that sweater, I've just gone and pulled out the colours here for you. I actually figured it out. So it's Grayson, Florence, Orchid, Sprout, Mist, and then, instead of the truffly one, because we don't have that, but you could do Stone. And that would give you the palette. So that can be done.
Absolutely.
So, yeah, so so then for that sort of thing, it's absolutely perfect. But what you're wearing is of course, you and I have often talk about the love of different styles of yarn, and that is a yarn that's a woolen spun yarn. Am I correct?
This is a woolen spun. It is to a 4-ply weight, or as I would still call it, fingering weight. Oh, please hold. Sorry, everyone. The tail of the project got caught around the pen. We're all good now. So this is a 4-ply woolen spun yarn. So the joy of the woolen spun, please hold while I grab a prop. A woolen spun yarn like this has a very fluffy texture to it. I'm just going to spread this little tail of the skein.
I'm going to pop you right here because I'm going to go and grab some props in a minute too. So.
Okay, perfect. So if you're looking at most of your yarns at home and you take a good look at them, they're going to have a much tighter twist on them. Let me grab a nice skein of some superwash 4-ply. So if we're looking at two yarns side by side here. So here we have a 4-ply yarn that is a 2-fold construction, woolen spun, has this beautiful fluff to it, very light and airy and bouncy looking, right? versus a yarn that's spun to the same weight that is a worsted spun construction with a superwash merino and a little bit of silk in it. And it has this tight twist to it. So when you're looking at the two different bases, it does give you the information of how they're going to knit up. So with something that has all of what we would refer to in the business as loft, which is the amount of space in the yarn between the fibers, loft, this is a very lofty yarn, where this is a very tight yarn. So high loft, low loft, which is why some woolen spun yarns use the term loft and shelter as the description of the yarn. It's actually not just the name of the yarn, but referring to the nature of the yarn, which is witty, but also annoying.
I did notice that we pun. I thought, oh, are we going to join dots? And you did. You joined some dots.
I'm here for you. So this was designed initially with a woolen spun yarn in mind. It was designed for Brooklyn Tweed's Loft, which is a rustic tweeded heathered woolen spun. So it will be incredibly thick and thin, very prone to breakage while being knit, which is important to remember about all woolen spun yarns. They are not as hardy in the skein or in your ball as they are once they're blocked. But the moment that they're blocked, because they have all of these loose jumbled ends to the shape of the fiber and the way that the yarn is spun, they grab onto each other and create a much more cohesive final fabric that has a little bit more in common with a felted fabric than a traditionally knit fabric that we would be used to from our worsted spun superwash ones, which are going to be slicker because these fibers do not grab onto each other intentionally because the scales that hold them in place on the fiber have been removed, which has benefits and negatives. And as Marie said already, there is a yarn for every purpose. It's important to choose the right yarn for the right project, which is why, you know, when we talk about color work, we often discuss using Southlander for it because Southlander, Little Bandit, Rebel, they're all really well suited to that because they have that natural grip still intact. I actually saw a fabulous color work project by Ray Webb yesterday here in shop. It is the 8-bit jersey, and she is knitting it all in Southlander. It is an all-over color work one that has 8-bit game characters as the color work motifs all over it. And it looks superb in that yarn because it is grabbing onto itself and holding shape. So with a yarn like this, when you're doing stuff like these micro cables, which are done by twisting the stitches and cabling them simultaneously, and has little pearl bumps in between the stitches to make this very chain-like effect of it, you really get a lot of depth and a lot of texture because as the stitches grab onto one another, when they stack on top of each other, because when you are building cable, you are taking two stitches that are side by side and you are temporarily stacking them. And then in the next row, you are allowing them to settle back down. And so the shape of the cable that you see is that stacked stitches. So the more stitches you stack in the number of stitches width-wise, the higher the stack gets, the more dimensional the cable. So when you have a piece of fabric knitted in a woolen spun yarn and you're cabling with it, because the stitches will grab onto one another, the stacking is more pronounced, but it produces that cohesive fabric with no gaping at the edges of your cable.
Now, and it also needs to be said, this is where the brilliance of Nora lies, because as you said, it was knit on 3 needles. So 3.5 for the sleeves, 4.5 for the
3.75s for the sleeves,
3.75 for the sleeves,
for the flaps, and 3.5 for the body.
3.5 for the body. So she's gone and pulled that in to actually keep those cables really rigid.
Structure. And you can see because all of the weight in this jersey is actually continuously offset. So because it is knit, there's 2 identical pieces. The front and the back are completely identical, but because of where the ribbing is put, it still actually has a drop shoulder construction.
Yeah.
But the ribbing in the top disperses the weight from the edge of the shoulder down into the body, which has a really deep triple side seam because it's actually 3 separate pieces seamed to 2 pieces are seamed to the set itself, and then they're seamed together. So there is an incredible amount of structure. And because the ribbing flows literally into that side seam by way of a garter stitch gusset right here that you pick up and knit, there is absolutely no pressure or tension put on the eyelets, which is why they don't stretch out of shape.
Yeah. Yeah. Which, you know, that may not seem a lot to a lot of people, but believe me, when a garment is actually worn, that is so incredibly important.
Yeah.
So this yarn, so is this one the fleece and forage that you're wearing?
This is not. This is actually from Rebel Destiny. This is one of the colors that will be getting its name this Saturday morning. It
with
is
tarot cards?
With our tarot card reading. As you know, this has been a bit of a journey to get this yarn out to market. Thankfully, you came up with several solutions. Deb came up with several solutions, and I turned up and looked good in it, which is how the three of us work traditionally.
It is pretty much, yeah.
Yeah, it's a gift, honestly. So the good news about that is we have been naming it every week on Breakfast Bourbon, our companion show to the Skeinz Diaries, if you will, because you guys can't get enough of all of us. So we're here. We're here to balance it out so that Marie doesn't have to be on camera 7 days a week, because we did that for a while. And,
and we're not doing it again.
Ooh, no, just so you know, if we ever go back into lockdown, we're not repeating that experiment. Yikes.
Absolutely not.
Jesus. But we did it. So the good news is we try to come up with a fun way to name this. Like, I think that we've all talked about the fact that people need to be having more fun with their knitting. And like, it needs to be less serious. Like, we need less china cups with our fingers out. And if that's your style and that's your fun, then that's your fun. But for the rest of us, it's a little bit more like loose and fast. Now, I'm saying this while still knitting arguably the most over the top and kind of that very position.
Yeah,
except I'm not touching a glass of tea.
How is life in your glass house, darling?
Well, I'm holding on to that magnum of champagne with a tight fist. And as you know, I refuse to drink out of anything that's not crystal. So just licking it back. Fine with my choices. Obviously, I wake up like this. And yeah, so it's about finding the fun for each person. And Deb and I both do a little bit of horoscope reading. We might already own some tarot cards. We smudge the house, put our crystals out for the moonlight. It's a whole thing. So just for all of you at home, we are doing tarot card readings to name the yarns. So we shuffled the deck and left it set shuffled where it is. And each week we're just pulling more cards off the top of the deck, 4 cards per week to name the colors. So we have 8. I'm just looking over to the table to count them. We have 8 colors out currently, and 4 more will join them all the way through till February 13th. And that's the basic plan. And the good news is, as always, I have selfishly gone ahead and skeined the yarn that I want to use first. So I do actually have a little bit of show off time. Now, I have decreased the number of patterns that I currently have on the needles, except I have 2 design commissions that are in timeout because someone decided that a double knit shawl collar button band on a 3.25 millimeter needle was a great idea.
As I said, life in your glass house. Yes.
Yeah, it's okay. I only made a fully seamed Japanese style saddle shoulder with incorporated borders, just for the record, that also has the selvage stitches for seaming included. Wow. Yeah, it's really easy. People are going to want to knit it nonstop, but something that you might actually want to cast on when you have access to more colors.
Big screen action there.
So this is sleeve 1 of my tapestry cardigan by Veronique Avery. Now, for those of you who aren't familiar with Veronique, she is a designer based in Montreal, Canada. So she used to be very geographically close to me. And she was one of the original Brooklyn Tweed design team members. So way, many moons ago, when Marie and I were young, there was a company called Universal Yarns that produced some truly beautiful yarn in a very...
Still do.
They still do. They still do. And they hired a man named Jared Flood to do some design work for them. And Jared thought to himself, oh, golly, I can run with this. And he started a wee little company that you may have heard of called Brooklyn Tweed, who make beautiful yarn that's impossible to get. However, they have one of the largest design catalogs probably in the knitting world, just full of really well-written, intricate patterns, because they've always given their designers a lot of freedom to just run with things. So Chainlink that I'm wearing, Yishu, the pullover that I already have, the V-front one that I made last year, and Agnes are all from the same collection, which is Brooklyn Tweed's Winter 2015, which largely features a 4-ply woolen spun yarn. So I have decided to leap right into making all of the simplest and smallest garments from that collection. So this is the beginnings of tapestry. Once you get through the sleeves.
So the sleeves knit first?
I have both of them. Pardon?
Are the sleeves knit first?
So I always knit my sleeves first. I've got to say, it is a weird habit of mine with every single jersey that I make. I almost always make the sleeves first so that I don't have to live on Sleeve Island later.
Yeah.
And
okay. Well, I mean, you know, we've talked about before doing the sleeves, you know, but if you're doing a top down, going out and doing the sleeves. So, exactly. You know, I mean, yeah, okay.
And I tend to be occasionally, if it's a yarn that I've used a lot of times, like I have already with this one, I can be a little bit of a lazy swatcher. And so instead of actually swatching, I will knit the sleeve and block it.
Yeah.
Because it only takes me normally a couple of days to make a sleeve. So if I get a sleeve like this done, then I just rip it back if it's wrong. And I make another one until I get the right gauge. And what's really fun about this, you may notice on camera that it seems like some of the color work is blurring in and out around this portion here.
Yep.
It's not. Instead, you're actually incorporating purl stitches.
Ah, you see that in those chevrons, yep.
Yep, so the chevrons, including this dark one here, which actually has 2 colors in it that are really closely related, you're incorporating purl stitches to create this jacquard effect to the fabric. So when you're making this, it actually looks far more like a woven fabric than a knitted fabric because you have that almost warp and weft effect, say that 3 times fast, from the purl and knit stitches interacting. And I, as everyone may or may not be aware, I do love a little bit of color work. I did make a Fox Thoughts. I might have already started a second one. So the goal here, when you're making something like this, is tension first, everything else second. Once you have your tension working well, which you can always tell by simply flipping your object inside out, pardon all of the loose ends, and seeing how even your floats are on the wrong side. So if there's no distortion on the wrong side as you're working, then you know that you're already on the right track. And I will be honest, with something like this yarn, you could always just wet felt the ends together. You may have a couple of stitches on either side of the beginning and end of the round that are in the slightly wrong color, but they're at the underarm. No one's going to notice that. Alternatively, because this is a very grippy yarn, what I'm going to do, actually, everyone at home, is I'm actually just going to trim these down to about a 4 centimeter length and then just let them naturally felt instead of weaving them in. Which is a very Scandinavian approach.
I was just going to say that's very Deborah in her approach, you know, because heaven forbid, you know, because I don't know whether you know, there's been a running joke with her and I for years about woven ends. And that's very her. See, look, no, because I was talking about woven ends on Monday, and I'm just going to show you this while we're here. Because I decided not to carry the colours up with us because there were so many, and it just turns. I was saying on Monday, it looks like messy computer cable, you know, and it just. And I know that some people go, "Oh, I hate weaving in ends," but you know, it took me 3.5 hours to weave all these in. You stuck on, as you said, you put on documentaries. I stuck on. It was the Shawshank Redemption for me. Was a good chunk of it, but see, that's just it. You just, I mean, I wove mine in.
Exactly.
it does make a difference, particularly if you take the time. I mean, you and I have had the finishing conversation, I know, off camera many times.
Oh, yeah.
And it's the one thing that will often drive me to distraction is how people will not, they will spend so much time knitting a garment and then they do not finish it well. And it's like it unravels literally every stitch you've knit for days on end.
It drives me nuts. So I have like a top 3. As everyone probably knows if you've watched this before, am the most neurotic caster oner of a garment. There is a correct cast on for every project, which means there's also a wrong cast on for every project, friends at home. And so I always very specifically take a lot of time with my cast-ons. For someone who is a very fast knitter, which I am, I would say that I am willing to spend upwards of an hour just getting a cast-on just right, because that's the foundation of the garment. And the finishing is like the roof. Everything else in between is the house. If you don't have a solid foundation and a good roof, it doesn't matter how flash your house is, it's going to fall apart. And these things are made to last for years and years and years. I am a particularly cautious weaver inner of ends. I really enjoy to weave my end. Part of why I like knitting with seams is I like to weave my ends back through the seams vertically. A, it adds more structure and stability to the seams. B, it's practically invisible as you go. And C, it makes it really clear which ends have been woven in. Yeah. And I have to say, I love the way that you wove in those ends on that flat stripe work, because you can see where the work has gone into it. And you also know that they're stable. And I just find that people tend to rush that finishing thing to try to get a garment on. This is not a fast process. If you wanted a garment quickly, you'd go to Hallenstein's.
Yeah. And the other thing I'll show you that I did as well is because with this garment here, and thank you to Michelle, I think, who answered a question for someone who was asking what this pattern was. It is Miss Jane from Georgie Nicholson, but she designed it for a single color. I'm the one who's added the stripes in. But one of the things—
doesn't sound like you.
No, not like me at all. I'm on a vacation. Who would have thought? Is with this pattern here, what this pattern is really clever about is it is top down and it has gone and knitted it partially modular. So instead of actually, it's only had a second, this is actually the second part of what would have been a raglan sleeve. And it's just designed to sort of pop over it. Well, similar actually to the cardigan I'm wearing right now. And you then go to right angles and pick up stitches across this edge in order to go down and around.
Which also gives so much structure.
Which does give some structure. Now, of course, with that, on the end that because I did even row striping. So on the edge where there aren't ends, of course, you have this nice picked up edge, right? Of course, at the other end, you've got Octopus City, because you've got all of those ends there. So what I did, and I mentioned it on Monday, is I made sure that I actually picked up with an additional stitch. So instead of going through with the normal sort of selvage that I would do on a pickup, I actually went one extra. And I did that quite deliberately because I wanted to create for myself essentially like a gutter or a gusset.
Yes, to tuck all the ends and stuff into.
Tuck all of those ends into, because I was then working, I didn't want to bring those ends back up into the colour work here.
No.
It made much more sense to actually, if you're already going to have a picked up edge in a seam, it makes much more sense to actually apply them there. So those are the little sort of things that you can do to actually help.
I did literally the exact same thing with the button bands on my 7Ts cardigan by Katrin Schneider, which I knit in our Bohemia Gothic, and it is striped in 3 colors. And there is a 8-row stripe section that uses all 3 colors at once. And it's knit seamlessly but flat. So it has the same thing on the one end and the difference on the other. And to hide all of that, I did the exact same thing. I created that extra space by going in one extra stitch. And I actually did a twisted stitch pickup selvage. So I twisted the second stitch each front.
I'm chatting. If you're not careful, Colin, you're going to go live out to the interweb.
No, I don't want to.
You don't want to do that?
You keep going.
I will. Thank you, Colin.
Yep.
Take care. Sorry about that. That is the lovely Colin who retired with us at the end of last year, and I haven't seen him since. Bless his heart. Now, the yarn is available, obviously, with you guys at Outlaw HQ or outlaw.com. But we also, for those that like the idea of a woolen spun yarn, because we're a worsted maker, we do have some woolen spun yarns as well. And I will show you those. In fact, we've probably sold through 2/3 of the stock that we've got.
And I have a couple balls of it, and everyone, it's awful. Don't buy it. No.
So this is the lamb's wool version that we've got.
Beautiful.
It's gorgeous. It's called Incognito. So we have got, and I know a number of you picked it up at Stitch and Summer. So if you really like that sort of idea, we do actually have some there as well in a selection of colours, which I think just makes a huge difference for people. They really do enjoy being able to play around with that. Now, I did have a question. I think I saw it the other day. I think it popped up on the speakeasy, or it might have been on the Outlaw page. I can't remember which, but someone was asking about the Master of Knitting program, and I know that you have done.
I have done some of the courses.
So talk people through that. Like, I know that if people are interested, because I know you and I have talked about it again off camera. Charles Gandy has been in my ear about doing it with all that spare time that I have.
Yeah.
So if somebody's interested, give them an idea, because I'm seeing a number of people in chat in there that I think that this sort of program might actually interest you, because it and Suzanne Bryan, who I've interviewed a few times before, and I've been on her podcast.
She's amazing.
She's amazing, and she's actually one of the on the, I think, the tutorial, and
she is on the tutorial and the examination board, if I remember.
Yeah, so she's on both. So talk people through it. Like, so in this part of the world, I mean, how would it work? Is it possible? Is it something that people should consider? And what would you get out of it?
So the Masters of Hand Knitting is not a recent discovery. It's run through the University of Massachusetts, Amherst, if I'm remembering which campus correctly. It's the one that is closest to the Webb's yarn store, because their summer series happens at that particular location. There are two main ways to do it. There are a series of in-person courses that run when UMass is closed, that you can physically go to in the summers. So you can block it out and do it over roughly a month period every summer. I think it takes 5 years to do it that way if you only do the work there. You can also do it. All of the projects, by the way, for the Masters of Hand Knitting are listed on Ravelry. That is how you get the projects that you have to make. There is a variety of different components to it, and it is not a choose your own adventure. You have to do the components sequentially. You have to work with a variety of different yarns at different stages, but mostly what they're looking for is for you to work with a white round, and by round I mean what I would refer to as a quarter round, which means a 4-plied construction yarn, usually in a natural white, not in an optic white. Optic white is yarn that has been bleached and then actually dyed with a white dye.
I know our vintage is one that a number of people have actually done the MK program. Yeah.
Vintage would be a really, really good choice for this. The reason that they want you to be using this particular yarn is because they want to see every phase of the work. Now, the thing about doing some of the work by submission is, especially in this current postal situation, it will take a little bit more time, because occasionally with this, what you are doing essentially is you are knitting a series of objects and writing a series of papers that accompany the objects to explain why you are making choices and why certain knitted objects are built the way that they are. The goal of the Masters of Hand Knitting is to create the most well-rounded knitter possible, so that you at the end of this process are able to look at any pattern and proceed to knit it. Now, there are a few things that they are still, I would say, updating into the process. So I just want everyone to know, if you're going into this and thinking, ooh, tuck stitches, ooh, brioche lace, anything created by Nancy Marchand, arguably one of the greatest technical knitters of our generation, although not a garment knitter. So don't go bother her if you see her in a pattern. She is not releasing that. She's not interested. Those sorts of things are now just entering into it, because previously those sorts of stitches were not standardized. Of course, Nancy developed the standardization of those. So just, if you're hearing me and thinking, oh good, by the end of this I will be a master of brioche, you won't.
No. But also to the beginning, like I know in phase one, or stage one, I think they call it, don't they? Stage one. A lot of it is just around the knitting basics. And as you were saying, so things like you said before about cast-ons, you know, you cover cast-ons, you cover tension, you cover blocking, you cover...
Tension is probably the biggest thing in phase one.
Yeah.
You knit multiple tension samples according to all sorts in stitch patterns, and learning specifically, one of the big things that people may not necessarily think of that they cover really extensively is how to use your hands to form a stitch so that your purl stitch and knit stitch are consuming the exact same amount of yarn. For those of you who occasionally look at my knitting in person, one of the most frequent comments I get is that my ribbing is incredibly even. There's almost no difference between the knits and the purls. My ribbing is completely reversible. That's because I did phase one. And I did phase one in person. So I went to one of the summer series at UMass and sat there. And someone actually critiqued the way that I physically was knitting. Now, I knit with a unique method, and they describe it as a unique method. So there are two main styles of knitting, British and continental. There is also a subgenre of British style knitting called cottage knitting or lever knitting, where you're knitting with the needle under the arm, which produces incredibly even tension and works very rapidly. And if you're very skilled, is much faster than most other formats. There are the unique styles, so specifically Portuguese knitting and hybrid knitting. And I qualify in the third category of hybrid knitting. I do a very strange thing where I tension my yarn continental, but I knit British, which is a weird, very unusual method, but it is very rapid and produces incredibly even tension. So you're right. That first phase is all about the basics. There is an entire phase about finishing, in which they talk about things like picking up stitches without creating gaps. You will knit an annoying series of mittens in that phase, which doesn't sound like much, but the mittens teach you this really interesting fact about how to close those gaps without using any seaming. And there's a portion on seamless top-down knitting that's, of course, developed from the Elizabeth Zimmerman method, because she did write a lot of what goes into this. Because I think that what we forget about as knitters is what this offers you, especially, is a method of approach to knitting so that you can standardize and break down any pattern that you come across. I often say when I'm helping someone select a pattern to go onto Ravelry and look to find patterns that have really consistent results from the knitters. Look at a variety of body types, a variety of other things, and you'll be able to find patterns that work. But you may find when you look at patterns that aren't as well written or as thoroughly written out that you see a certain select number of knitters who are still producing these beautiful, consistent results. What the Masters of Hand Knitting does is it turns you into that knitter. It means that you can approach any pattern and look at it and go, oh, the pattern says to cast on, but does not tell me how to cast on. When you complete the Masters of Hand Knitting, you will have in your own brain immediately the answer of which cast on should be used in this circumstance. Am I considering whether or not a cast on is self-tensioning? Does it have stretch? How does it apply to the edges of garments? The way that they discuss things gives you a schema and framework for the approach to knitting that is standardized, where you're using terminology that is consistent across patterns, garments, and everything. And it also ensures that you have each phase of the skills in the correct order. In today's world of knitting, which is wonderful and beautiful, and there is a designer for everyone and a pattern for everyone to knit, we have gone off the several hundred years of beaten track. I would say that the Masters of Hand Knitting is like a lighthouse in a stormy sea to guide you into a safe harbor of success as a knitter. It is not easy, and it is very time consuming, but if you're someone who has a closet full of hand knits already, and you know that each of those knits could have been better, but you don't know how they could have been better, the Masters of Hand Knitting teaches you to answer that question before you cast on. And if you're a new knitter and all you can do right now is knit in purl, there is huge value in jumping in now, because it means that all of that work that you're going to put into developing your knitting skills will be happening in this guided method that will shape you into the knitter that you want to be. I will be honest, I made a very curious decision when I came back to knitting. So to be clear, I have knit consistently since I was about 4 years old, but for the largest portion of that, I made the same exact repetitive square, and I had them crocheted together into blankets, and I donated them to homeless shelters. I made a lot of those, several thousand of them, which is why I have incredibly consistent tension, because all I did for years was knit, just knit over and over again. The interesting fact about me, though, is when I came back to knitting, I immediately fixated on patterns written by Jared Flood, who has not completed the Masters of Hand Knitting, but oh boy, if there is someone who could give most technical knitters out there a run for their money, it's Jared. And he writes patterns that way. So when I started doing phase one, I found that because I had worked from so many of his patterns, that I had these skills. So there is, what I'm saying here is there's more than one way to skin the knitting cat. But if you want surety, and if you want to know that you're going to produce these timeless heirloom garments that will last past your generation, you know, those mittens that are made in Scandinavia that last for 40 years last because they follow the same way that a mitten is knit when you knit a mitten at the Masters of Hand Knitting. And all of those techniques, those little decisions that you make are so important. So it's about the granular details when you're talking about the Masters of Hand Knitting.
And also too with the mouse, and I think these, as you said, there is a place for everything and everyone within the knitting community. And this is one of the things it does is it's the Master of Hand Knitting, the way I look at it, and I know the conversation I've had with Charles, is around a toolbox. You know, it provides you with the skills in the toolbox that you need to do all the different things, so you don't feel overruled or challenged by something. And I mean, I'm lazy, so I mean, you know, I mean, how you live in your nice little glass house of perfection and neuroses, I'm about as far from that as you could possibly get. However, I do have certain sort of things in regards to skills and things that are foundation pieces that I just think you can't, those are lines that you can't cross. What the Master of Knitting has, I think, is it's the difference between knitting for function versus knitting for form. So often too, or fashion. So now there are a lot of designers that are coming through that are incredibly fashion forward, and they are using different techniques, and they're using in terms of, and interpretations around gauge, which is me being polite, because you know what I've often said when I've not been as polite.
Oh,
generally wine is involved. But that has its place too, because often when you're knitting for fashion like that, you're only knitting for a very limited window of time. So therefore, if you're providing or knitting or creating a garment that is only really meant to service you across a fashionable time, you know, a period of time within fashion that you'll feel comfortable with, well, it doesn't need to last 40 years.
Bobbles. I agree with you.
So,
to me, that is one of the things that really confuses me. I consider the majority of things that I knit to be timeless. I don't think that you look at chain link and you could pin it to a specific moment in knitting. I believe that this garment will look modern in 50 years, and I believe it looks modern now. But it is built on the foundation of the previous techniques. There are no tricks in this garment. There are no shortcuts, and there are no half measures. Everything in this is selected to create something that not only is beautiful, but has both form and function. And like, I'm a big believer of style over fashion. I have no fashion in many ways. I'm not a fashionable person. I don't care particularly about it. Style over fashion to me has always been the difference between H&M and Dolce & Gabbana. Sorry, Chanel and Dolce & Gabbana. Like, when you think about Chanel, it is timeless and classic, and it is a style, not a fashion. When you think about Dolce & Gabbana, you think about Stefano and 3 half-naked men.
But I mean, all of us will have those patterns in our libraries. You know, there'll be those ones that you just go back to time and time again. You know, I mean, I think of there's a shepherd baby cardigan that has been around since I think the 40s, the 50s.
Totally.
There's this little hooded baby cardigan. It is just, but again, it's the most beautiful little piece of classically written styling that just doesn't date. And
this is pure Shetland lace. That's all this is. This is two-sided, all working rows, Shetland lace. This is a full lace hat. So traditional garter stitch center, little eyelet border to it, complex lace work at the edge, plain garter stitch decreasing down to the middle. That's it.
Oh, you're into the easy street portion now.
Yeah. Whoo, boy.
Now I'm going to show you this.
You know, like this is the foundation of my knitting background. I don't talk about it a lot. I used to knit quite a bit of lace. And like this is made out of a very weird yarn. Like, this is a literal cobweb of yarn. There we go. There's some contrast. Turns out I'm the same color as the yarn, and it's from Shetland. So yeah, this is a single ply, 100% Shetland, made in Shetland, true Shetland lace yarn. So there's nothing to this. This is the most historical knitting from my culture, real background. I'm half Scottish, that I could go for. And when I am done and this is blocked, I will be able to pull this through a wedding band. You know, but you're right. Those timeless pieces, this is never going to go out of style.
No.
You know, I personally think that this beautiful zigzagging Shetland lace looks just as modern today as it did probably, what are we talking about here? Like almost 500 years ago when these first started showing up, the haps. Like, yeah, I'm a big fan. And the Masters of Hand Knitting does give you the ability to go from, you know, this giant colorwork 376 stitches per round, you know, situation to working these sort of twisted cables, multiple construction base, to doing Shetland lace. It all comes from that common background for me. Yeah.
Absolutely. Brilliant. So hopefully who asked that question was watching will get to catch up and watch this, but I'm going to show you this.
Okay, I love that though. Is that in the pulse?
That's the pulse. Oh.
So like I am a sucker for yarn. I don't know if anyone has ever grasped that. And those big, long, slow color changes, like just.
And that is 3 balls. So it's completely random, like none of the same.
I love it.
I know. I'm so happy with it all.
And that is fractally plied. Am I correct?
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah. Amazing. For all you hand spinners out there, fractally plied, you're welcome. Yeah. I did that hand spinning portion. Oh, bye.
It's great. Really, just so thrilled with it. Guy, what color? That color is Ripple, I think. Ripple, yeah, it's Ripple, Guy. I tell you the one that I do love that I think you would have a look as well, Guy, when you jump on the color that, and I know Heather has grabbed it, is there were two colors that drew me. One was that Ripple, which to me just was like French Impressionist painting. The other color that I love is called Tempo, which is the dark, broodier one. And both of those are the ones that have a really broad spectrum of color across the range. So some of them are narrower, like Flow, which is in the blues, which I know you would really like, has a narrower band of sort of color alternation, whereas Ripple and Tempo have these really crazy, so well, not crazy, but they just really diverse changes in color. And the Tempo is just these beautiful, rich, saturated shades, whereas that's sort of very, very soft and ethereal, which is perfect.
I've been stalking the pulse because my thought was taking one of the Tin Can Knits super simple yoked jerseys, and instead of changing colors multiple times,
just having the pulse,
just doing the pulse as the yoke, does all the work for you.
Margaret, any orange? Actually, the Tempo, yes, there is. The Tempo's the one with the orange, but and then there's also one that's this. I'll just look it up while I'm here, Margaret.
In the chat, help
Tempo is so Tempo's sort of got oranges and sort of turquoises and dark jadey greens, and it's like it uses a lot of contrasting color technology, whereas the one that's sort of quite orangey is called Quiver. So that's got what I would call a warm sort of orangey base, and Sway has got a good amount of orange through it as well. Yeah, and Tempo. So Tempo is like orange, dark oranges, like terracotta greens and blues and those colors, whereas so Quiver, which is the basis in sort of pumpkin mandarin earthy tones, both Quiver and Flow are the two that are quite tight together in terms of sort of color range. So yeah, they're definitely worth checking out. So I'm really delighted with those. Yeah, and and that's one of the fun things with that color work, because it is as you said, like I pulled out the Goldwing that I did, because I did that in the Carney.
Yeah, in the Carney, yeah.
Yeah, but the thing is that you could do it in this.
Oh, it would be so good.
It would be amazing, absolutely amazing. And I mean, that pattern was written for a DK anyway, and I just used a lighter weight because it was
That
me.
doesn't sound like you.
No, heaven forbid I made changes.
I was thinking, so I have a top 3 pulse patterns pick for everybody at home that I've been thinking of. So no surprise, 2 of them are Stephen West. So he has the Night Nook sweater, which is a striped garter stitch. It has brioche saddle shoulder construction. I think using the Tempo and mixing with the Orb in one of the solid colors for the yoke and the brioche would just be amazing, because you would see it's in garter stitch, the yoke of it. And so I just think that those sorts of long, slow color repeats in garter stitch stripes are really beautiful, especially with a strong contrasting color. Number 2, also from Senor West, surprising no one, the Excuse Me shawl. Now, this is a brioche shawl, entirely knit in brioche, 2-color brioche. It would use one contrasting color and one main color, or you could stripe it. So you could use a bunch of the different tempos as the background color to stripe, remembering that brioche is fully reversible. So your right side and wrong side, you can flip them back and forth however you like when you're wearing it, and it looks fantastic. I've made it before. I knit one of the original samples actually in, I think, Tosh DK probably. Ooh, that was many moons ago. And my last pick is the Compass sweater, which is all over colorwork from the lovely folks at Tin Can Knits. There we go. I made one last year as well.
Oh, yeah, of course you did. Yes, I know that one. You did it in Nix.
I did do it in Nix. And I think that it would be so fantastic, because you would only need one background color, and then you would use the pulse as the color work, and you could just really rip through it, and there would be almost no ends to weave in for all of you at home.
Yeah, and it's it's funny you had this conversation. So I had this. I was in with someone in the shop on Monday, and they were looking at the Swan Show, and they're like, absolutely love the Nanilchik Swan Show. And I said, well, this is the thing. That Swan Show would look great because we've got the Flight, which is the solid versions of contrast colors that we've got exactly the same construction, same fiber, same construction, same count.
Beautiful.
So you can tie the two together and see that Swan Show using a combination of the two, and then you could pick out. I mean, I would be inclined to pick out either one or two of the colors in there, and have two in Pulse, and then the main color and another color in the Flight, and it just and you could actually pony up, double up, and figure out which two colors don't necessarily combined together all the time, and then you can actually sort of mix and match around, and you can just be bold,
have some fun,
absolutely.
I mean, I consider the kind of wacky, I actually think this is quite far outside of this is entirely inside of my style of knitting, and really pushing up to the edges of my color palette, actually using this many colors at once. To be clear, everyone, these are all colors I love, but like I tend to max out at 2 colors. There are 5 in this.
May I just remind you of something? Liar, pants on fire. But anyway, keep going.
So there are 12 colors in that yoke of the version I knit. But I mean, the designer and the dyer did design that colorway to suit me, so like I can't really argue. It's pretty perfect,
right?
And I mean, now I'm knitting with like one of my favorite colors of all time. This is just like randomly undyed goodness. I will say, for those of you who have not knit with Shetland yarn in a cobweb weight before, if you treasure your eyesight, don't.
Yeah, I know. I have to admit that it's as I'm getting older, and as and I have to supplement the eyewear now for knitting. Dark. I mean, I used to think, why are people going on about dark colors at night? I know now. I completely get it. I totally understand.
I was like,
yeah. I know, it's crazy. All right, I'm going to head this off because I know I've got girls that I've got to cover for lunch since we're still down on the team. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank everybody for joining us today. And remember, Orb is on sale today for $5.95. So you've got till the end of the day to get that ticking along. And also Breakfast Bourbon, 10 o'clock on Saturday morning with Ethan and Deb. You'll be naming the yarn that you are wearing in your very person on Saturday.
And 3 of the colors that are in that sleeve.
And if you want to check the yarn out, they are live now on outlaw.com.
They are live now on outlaw.com, and they are sitting on the table right to the side of me as well, if you can make it into the shop. 22
Stanley Street in Sydenham if you want to go, and there's some very good coffee nearby, so you don't need to worry about that. Yes. So until then, I will talk to everybody again on Monday. Have a great weekend and get stitching.